The crying spirit of vengeance. They call it Widow's Crossing, but no one tells you why. No warnings, not directly. The locals avoid the subject, muttering nervously whenever the bridge comes up. But their evasiveness makes you curious, and that curiosity could kill you. I didn't believe in curses or ghosts, not until that night. Not until I stood face to face with her. It was a cold October evening. Rain pounded the windshield relentlessly, turning the roads slick and treacherous. My guilt weighed as heavily as the storm clouds above. I wasn't coming from work. I was coming from a place I shouldn't have been, doing things I shouldn't have done. My wife didn't ask questions when I said I'd be late. She never did anymore. The road was empty except for the rhythmic drum of rain. As I approached the bridge, a chill swept through the car, sharp and unnatural. It wasn't the kind of cold you fix with a heater. It crept under your skin and stayed there. That's when I saw her. She stood at the edge of the road, illuminated by my headlights, a woman in a white dress. Her long, drenched hair clung to her face, and her swollen belly was impossible to miss. She didn't move, didn't signal for help, just stood there in the rain, cradling her stomach as if it might shatter. I should have kept driving. Instead, I slowed down, rolling down the window. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice trembling against the sound of the rain. She turned her head toward me, her eyes dark and hollow. When our eyes met, it felt like she could see right through me, to every secret I tried to bury. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I need a ride." Every instinct screamed for me to leave, but guilt rooted me to the spot. I unlocked the door. She climbed in silently, water pooling on the seat. The temperature plummeted instantly and my breath fogged in the icy air. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Just drive," she murmured, her voice soft but commanding. The bridge loomed ahead, a dark and shadowy sentinel. My grip on the wheel tightened as I stole glances at her. She clutched her belly, her knuckles white. Her soaked dress clung to her body, but something about her seemed off. Wrong in a way I couldn't explain. "You shouldn't be out here alone." I ventured, my voice shaky. "Alone," she said softly, almost to herself. "That's all I've ever been." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. "Do you believe in justice?" she asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the rain. "What?" "Justice," she repeated, sharper now. "Do you believe people get what they deserve?" "I don't know. Maybe," I stammered. She let out a hollow laugh, bitter and cold. "Good," she said, "because it's time." Before I could respond, the car lurched violently. The headlights flickered, and the engine sputtered. The radio crackled, static giving way to low, guttural whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. "You lied to her," a voice hissed. "She trusted you," another snarled. Panic surged through me. "What's happening?" I shouted, slamming on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt in the middle of the bridge. I turned to the passenger seat, but she was gone. My heart pounded as I scanned the road. That's when I saw her again. She stood in front of the car now, her figure distorted by the rain and flickering headlights. Her swollen belly bulged grotesquely, and her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her eyes burned with an unholy light. "You took everything from me," she screamed, her voice echoing unnaturally, as if a dozen voices spoke at once. "I don't know you," I yelled, fear choking my words. "You're just like him," she spat. "Unfaithful, deceptive, a coward." The bridge groaned beneath me, the stones cracking and shifting. The air filled with a mournful wail, and the water below churned violently, glowing with an eerie green light. Images flashed before my eyes, horrific, vivid memories of her life. A man standing on the bridge, his face twisted in anger, her pleading with him, tears streaming down her face. A younger woman emerging from the shadows, her expression cold and calculating, a knife glinting, a scream, blood pooling on the stones. "You must pay," she said, her voice filled with fury. She lunged toward me, her body contorting unnaturally as skeletal hands tore free from her swollen belly. I stumbled out of the car, gasping for air. "Stay away," I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the howling wind. The bridge stretched endlessly in both directions, trapping me. Her laughter echoed around me, cruel and mocking. "You can't run," she said. "You can't hide." The skeletal hands reached out, clawing for me as shadows swirled around her. "Please," I begged, falling to my knees. "I'll do anything." Her fury faltered, sorrow flickering in her monstrous eyes. "Bring me justice," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Tell the world what he did. Make them remember my name. Only then will I rest." Before I could respond, the shadows closed in and everything went black. When I woke, I was lying on the side of the road, the bridge barely visible in the distance. My car was gone, and dawn was breaking over the horizon. Back in town, I pieced together her story. Her name was Ada, betrayed and murdered by the man she loved. Her body was buried beneath the bridge, but her spirit did not rest. Now she haunts Widow's Crossing, punishing the unfaithful and vengeful alike. If you ever find yourself near the bridge at night, turn back. Ada, the crying spirit of vengeance, knows your sins, and she's waiting. I couldn't sleep after that night. Ada's words, her plea for justice, haunted me like a curse. Every shadow in my house seemed alive, every creak of the floorboards a reminder of the bridge and her burning gaze. Weeks passed, but I couldn't shake the weight of her demand. "Bring me justice," she had said, her voice trembling with fury and grief. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was all a nightmare. But Ada didn't let me forget. It started small. My reflection in the mirror wasn't quite my own. My eyes looked darker, hollow, and the shadows around my face seemed to twist unnaturally. Then came the voices, whispers in the dead of night, low and guttural, calling my name. "Justice," they hissed. One night, I woke to the sound of sobbing. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, more desperate, filling the room. I turned on the light, but the crying didn't stop. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I sat up, clutching the crowbar I kept by my bed. "What do you want from me?" I shouted into the empty room. The sobbing stopped abruptly, and then the walls began to bleed. At first, it was just small red rivulets seeping from the cracks, but within moments, the room was drenched. The metallic stench of blood filled the air, choking me. I scrambled out of bed, slipping on the slick floor, my hands coated in crimson. "You promised," Ada's voice growled, reverberating through the room. Her twisted form materialized in the corner, her skeletal hands reaching toward me. Her eyes burned with a fury that made my chest ache. "I'm trying," I screamed. "I don't know how to find him." "You have until midnight," she said, her voice cold and final. "Fail me, and you'll join him." The blood vanished, leaving me gasping on the floor. I couldn't ignore her any longer. I needed answers, and I knew where to start. The townsfolk knew more than they let on, and I was done playing by their rules. The next morning, I went to the town's oldest resident, an old woman named Martha. She lived alone in a decrepit house on the edge of town, surrounded by overgrown weeds and dead trees. She didn't seem surprised when I showed up. "You've seen her, haven't you?" Martha said, her voice rasping. "Ada?" I nodded, my hands trembling. "I need to know who did this to her. I need to bring her peace." Martha sighed heavily. "Jonathan Dyer," she said, her voice heavy with disdain. "A cruel man. He used to live in the mansion on the hill, but he's gone now, disappeared years ago." "Gone where?" I demanded. "No one knows," she said, shaking her head. "But you won't find him the way you are now. Ada's curse won't let you. She doesn't want your help. She wants your suffering." I stared at her, horrified. She said she wanted justice. Martha laughed bitterly. "Justice? You don't understand, boy. Ada's spirit doesn't want peace. She wants vengeance. And she won't stop until you're broken, just like she was." I left Martha's house, her words echoing in my mind. Was this a trap? Was Ada using me for her own twisted revenge? That night, I dreamt of the bridge again. Ada was there, waiting. Her form was even more grotesque. Her swollen belly split wide open, revealing dozens of skeletal hands clawing for freedom. "You're running out of time," she said, her voice layered with anguish and rage. "I don't know where he is," I shouted. She stepped closer, her skeletal hands dragging along the ground, leaving trails of fire in their wake. "Then find him," she snarled, "or I'll find you." The next morning, I decided to return to the mansion on the hill. If Jonathan had lived there, maybe I could find a clue to where he'd gone. The mansion was even more decrepit than I remembered. The windows were shattered, and ivy crept up the crumbling walls. The air was thick with decay, the scent of rot overwhelming. I forced the door open and stepped inside. The house groaned around me, the floorboards sagging under my weight. Every step felt like a gamble, but I pushed forward, the flashlight in my hand casting long, eerie shadows. The whispers began almost immediately. "You lied," a voice hissed. "She trusted you," another sneered. I spun around, but there was no one there. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they were a deafening cacophony. And then the walls started to move. Faces began to emerge from the decayed wallpaper, their mouths opened in silent screams. Their eyes followed me as I moved, their expressions twisted with pain and fury. Leave, they moaned. But I couldn't leave, not without answers. I forced myself to climb the stairs, each step creaking ominously. When I reached the master bedroom, the door swung open on its own. Inside, the air was freezing, and the room was empty except for a single mirror hanging on the far wall. I stepped closer, my breath fogging the glass. The reflection wasn't mine, it was Ada's. Her eyes locked onto mine, and she smiled, a twisted, unnatural smile that made my blood run cold. "You're too late," she whispered. Before I could react, her skeletal hands reached through the mirror, grabbing my shoulders and dragging me forward. I woke up on the bridge. The storm raged around me, the water below glowing with that same eerie green light. Ada was there, her monstrous form towering over me. "You failed," she said, her voice filled with triumph. "No!" I screamed, struggling to my feet. "I'll find him. I'll bring him to you." She laughed, the sound hollow and cruel. "You still don't understand. This was never about him. It's about you." Her skeletal hands reached for me, wrapping around my throat. Shadows swirled around us, pulling me toward the edge of the bridge. "Please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I'll do anything." "Then suffer," she hissed. The last thing I saw was her burning eyes as the shadows swallowed me whole. Some say I disappeared that night. Others say they hear my screams on the bridge when the rain falls. But if you find yourself near Widow's Crossing after dark, remember this: Ada is always watching, and she knows your sins.